And just a reminder to mute yourselves until we're doing the Q&A. Okay, great. Well, welcome back to the Aquifer Protection Area Program Series. I'm Molly Johnson, Community Planner with Naugatuck+Valley Council of Governments. And thank you for being here today to talk about moving towards compliance. We wanted to host this as NVCOG in partnership with DEEP so that we could really connect the Aquifer Protection Area implementers with DEEP resources, with their technical support, and really get to understanding the program better. So today's session will have time for Q&A and office hours. And also feel free to enter questions in the chat as we go, and we will then look at those questions at the end and get to talk about them further. And the presentation is going to be recorded and shared on our website so that you can look back and refer to it, and we'll also share the PowerPoint with you as well. The Q&A portion won't be recorded so that we can have as open of a conversation as possible. And before we continue on, I wanted to look back at the compliance actions checklist. If you're participating in the series, you should have access to that with your zip file folder. And I just wanted to show the areas that we'll be discussing today, which is about site visits and site inspections. This is a highly recommended practice so that you can better understand the on-the-ground practices that are occurring in your aquifer protection area and monitor the registrations. So with that, I'll introduce today's presenters, Melissa Mostaway and Melissa Fonstock. They're both in the same little Zoom screen, which is great. And they have presented in the past on this series, so I won't do a more formal introduction, but just know that Melissa Mostaway is the environmental analyst for the water quality unit at DEEP, and Melissa Fonstock is the Municipal Aquifer Protection Area Technical Lead. So thank you both for being here, and with that, I'll let you take it from here.
Can we share them here?
Yes, and the only thing is your video is off, but
Oh yeah, that's okay. We're gonna keep it off for this because we have a lot of pictures and it gets
okay,
great. Oh yeah. Alrighty. Yeah, thank you, Molly. So yeah, today Melissa Fonstock and I are going to be presenting about site inspections, and the presentation will be done in two segments. So we're going to begin with an introduction to site inspections, how to prepare for your visit, conducting the inspection, and go over some post-inspection tasks. And then Melissa F. will go over some examples of compliance and non-compliance, how to address the compliance issues, and then finally go over some follow-up tasks after the registration and the permit has been issued. So site inspections are important because they allow you to verify if the site's in compliance with your APA program's best management practices. And from the beginning of the application process, the registrants and permittees are made aware that the APA agency has permission to make regular inspections. This is a screenshot from the exact language as stated on Section 7 of the certification part of the application, and language is highlighted here. Another important introductory note is that there are legal limitations for entry to a property. Without permission from the landowner, a municipal official does not have the authority to conduct an inspection on the property. Communication with the landowner is going to be discussed later in this presentation as part of the pre-visit processes. So these next few slides will go over the who, what, why, and when aspects of the site inspections. And I didn't bother with the where component because that's what this entire presentation is all about. So the who, those involved in site inspections include the APA agent or their staff, the zoning enforcement officer, the town planner, the inland wetland agent, or any similar position depending on the municipality, and any supporting inspectors. And that includes us at DEEP, the Department of Public Health, or staff from the affected water company. So what a site inspection includes are your observations. Some observations of concern include any spills or releases that could contaminate groundwater, fueling islands without a canopy and or aren't supported by impervious pavement and berms, portable fueling tanks such as through trucks, indications of an underground storage tank release, improperly stored or handled hazardous materials, and finally, improperly stored de-icing materials, floor drains that could discharge contaminants to the ground, and any release of chemical or hazardous material to a surface water body. And Melissa F. will go over examples and photos of these observations that I just listed so you can see what these actually look like in the field. So the reason why we conduct site inspections is to ensure compliance with the regulations and because any condition that may result in the release of contaminants to the groundwater is a concern. When site inspections are conducted, include but not limited to, after an application is received, as a follow-up to a previous inspection, or part of your program's annual routine. So when the time comes, the next few slides are to provide guidance in preparing, conducting, and following up from your site visit. When preparing for the visit, it's important to know any questions or concern that you came across during the application review and that you bring those notes with you for a discussion at the site. Other items that you can bring include the facility boundary map, a map that shows the facility within the APA boundary, your site inspection form, your field notebook or tablet if you have one, and most importantly, your identification. And that includes your town badge, town vehicle. It could be a vest that says your town logo or just anything that identifies you as a municipal agent. So when communicating with your site contact, it's important to inform them of the purpose of the visit, provide multiple options for dates and times for availability to conduct the visit, ask about any PPE or site restrictions that you should be made aware of before coming on site, ask about parking and the exact meeting location. And finally, we always like to follow up a day or two before the scheduled date to confirm the visit. So now on to conducting the inspection. Some considerations are to, of course, arrive on time and let the site contact know of any schedule changes. We like to exchange business cards so you remember who is present at the visit. We make sure we're wearing the appropriate PPE at all times. And just to, in general, be aware of your surroundings because there could be a lot of moving parts depending on where you are. In general, while conducting the site inspection, your tasks include taking notes and photos, filling out your inspection form, making observations, and asking questions. All right, now the next few slides are some photos taken during a site inspection we went on in Osborne-Dale State Park in Derby, Connecticut. And the goal for these slides is to demonstrate a very, very general walkthrough of observations made during a visit since we're not in person. So the first photo that I typically take is an overview of the facility, and this shows the building where the regulated activities occur and the general vicinity surrounding it. So while you're in the building, we like to make observations of where drums are located, how they're stored, how active chemicals are being used. So this is a repair and maintenance facility and they're repairing their lawnmowers. So somebody was actually working on this when we went here. And we like to see how chemicals are being stored when not in use. And if there are additional buildings you need to look into, like a hazardous waste storage shed that's separate from the main building, that definitely should be included in your site inspection. And again, we're looking for how material is stored and handled. This shed was pretty empty, so this is what we saw here. And finally, it's important to take a look outside. This is where you make observations on the condition of the dumpsters, outside storage of material, the condition of the pavement, how parking is managed, and if it applies, how de-icing is managed at the site. So here's a couple more photos. And again, these are your observations. So I include my apologies for my handwriting, but I like this photo because I want to stress the importance of taking notes. There's usually a lot of discussion during these inspections, and I strongly encourage just good note taking. And I mentioned an inspection form. So these are another way to capture the details of your visit and give you a more structured note-taking process. These forms provide guidance on what to look for and some questions to ask. And again, they help you organize any notes you may have taken. And the form format is up to you, whether it be a paper copy or digital. We used to do paper copy, but we've moved on to digital. And this was created for our state inspections using Survey 123. And this is nice because the information can be stored online and it can be downloaded as needed. And these are just snapshots of some components of the form. This isn't the entire one, but if you'd like to see it, I'd be happy to share. All right, so on-site considerations. While doing your site, walk around the site, it's important to consider the process flow by thinking about where the materials come in, where they're stored, where they're processed, how they're disposed, and how waste gets discharged or collected. And outside the building, again, it's important to think about how stormwater is managed and flows through the site. This is where you think about if materials are stored outside and how, the condition of the pavement, like are there cracks, should there be repaving to prevent infiltration, where vehicles are parked, are they on an impermeable or permeable surface, the de-icing management, do you see traces of salt residue on the parking area, and again, how dumpsters and waste is handled. So as I mentioned, one of the tasks during the visit is to ask questions, and I won't go through these all, but this is a list of common questions that we ask. And a lot of the times this is to help us remind ourselves to answer certain parts of the site inspection form. All right, so after the visit, even if you have left the site, your job is not even close to being done. Immediately after the visit, when I get back to my desk, these are the things I like to do. It's important to review your notes, complete the inspection form, upload your photos, and add in captions if you need to, and mark up your site map. Now, once all your notes, photos, and forms have been compiled, you're ready to write the site inspection report. And the purpose of this report is to provide a summary of your findings to the facility representatives. When distributing the report, it's important to copy your APA members and to make it part of the record of your next meeting. And if you'd like additional technical support, this report can also be sent to the affected water company staff, the Department of Public Health, and to us at DEEP. All right, so the next few slides are snapshots of a site inspection report that I wrote, which coincides with the photos I showed you earlier of Osbornedale State Park. The basic components of the report include the date, the inspector names, the site representatives, and that's where the business cards come in handy, and the weather, because that helps me jog my memory. The inspection overview, which states the reason why it was conducted, and the site background information. And this goes into 2-page, but the background information includes the function of the site, the surrounding bodies of water, where the site is located with respect to the APA boundary, the name of the affected water company, the APA name, and finally, the list of regulated activities. So the next section are the inspection findings and details, and this is where you state your observations. We include a statement about whether the site conditions are similar to previous inspections and the photo references to support each detail that was stated. So now, in my opinion, the most important part of the report is where you state the compliance violations, including the reference to the law and how the violations can be resolved and recommendations to ensure compliance. And now these last couple slides I have for you are examples of the attachments that we provide in the inspection report. The image on the left shows the facility and the parcel outline and the APA, and how this is displayed is up to you, and it also depends on the size of the site, the shape of the parcel, and where the regulated activities occur. And the image on the right here is a simple site map, and this is just helpful to identify the different buildings and areas you walked around, and if you found any problems, you can just like flag those and make it clear to your audience where your concerns are. All right, now finally, here's an example of how photos can be displayed in your report as an attachment. And with that, I'll hand that off to Melissa.
All right, thank you, Melissa. So now I'll be going over some examples of compliance and non-compliance. I'll review best management practices from Section 12 of the Model Municipal Regulations, and we'll look at some examples of site conditions that we've seen on some of our site inspections. The first best management practice I'll go over has to do with direct infiltration into the ground. Any device that allows the release of wastewaters to the ground is not allowed in an APA unless the registrant has a permit. Here is an example of floor drains in vehicle repair bays. Be aware of this for small auto repair shops that may have
like LID
straight directly into the ground. This is non-compliant with the regulations. In this case, you may ask the registrant to seal these floor drains, or they could get a holding tank, or get an approval from the publicly owned treatment works and discharge to the sanitary sewer. This would also require an oil water separator and a regular maintenance schedule. Here is an example of a floor drain in a vehicle washing bay where they have a permit and send this wastewater to the publicly owned treatment works. We confirmed this is connected to an oil water separator and the sewer system, and they in fact had the correct permit. These next best management practices have to do with the storage of hazardous waste. Hazardous material shall be stored in a building or under a roof that minimizes stormwater entry, and hazardous material must be stored on secondary containment. In this picture, we see that hazardous material drums are being stored outside with no protection from stormwater entry. They are also not being stored within secondary containment, so this would be considered non-compliant. This picture shows compliance with the regulations, where the drums are stored under a roof, protecting them from stormwater entry, and they're also being stored on secondary containment. This facility also has a spill kit readily available for any accidental spills that may occur. In this picture, we first see very poor housekeeping, but looking closely, we also see drums that are buried under maintenance equipment that are not on any secondary containment. Here we see an example of compliance, where hazardous waste drums are on secondary containment and the facility is practicing good housekeeping. We also see that they keep Speedy Dry nearby for any incidental spills when transferring materials to the drums. Here's another example of compliance with the facility practicing good housekeeping and organization. This facility has placed gas cans and other maintenance materials into secondary containment cabinets. The next best management practice states that floors where hazardous materials are stored must be treated to protect from deterioration of the floor in the event of incidental spills of the material. In this example, these drums are being stored in a large secondary containment area, but this is still considered non-compliant because the floor is not suitable for the hazardous materials being stored. we can see deterioration of the flooring around these drums. To come into compliance, the facility treated this area with an impermeable liner, which will protect the surface of the floor. Here's another example of non-compliance with this best management practice. This is a vehicle maintenance pit which contained drums of hazardous material. We observed heavy staining and deterioration of the flooring in the pit. So to come into compliance, the facility treated the floor with a specialty liner specifically designed to contain materials such as diesel fuel and oil that are used during vehicle maintenance. The next best management practice states a structure which may be used for storage or transfer of hazardous material shall be protected from stormwater runoff. This is a salt storage area where the salt is being stored in buckets on the ground and the tent is insufficient in preventing stormwater runoff. This is another example of insufficient protection from stormwater runoff. You can see that salt is washing out of the salt storage shed and is running into a stormwater drain directly down gradient. Here's an example of compliance where the salt is adequately contained in the salt storage shed. Hay bales were placed in front of the shed, protecting it from stormwater runoff. This photo shows an example of a fueling station that is not compliant because they do not have a cover over the fueling ports. This allows stormwater intrusion into the area where hazardous material is being transferred. Here's another example of non-compliance at a fueling station. In this instance, a stormwater drain is located down gradient of the fueling station, so any fuel that washes off will flow directly into the storm drain and will be discharged with the stormwater. This is an example of how one facility came into compliance with this best management practice at a fueling station. This is a mobile canopy that can be moved over the fueling port that is being used to protect against stormwater runoff during the transfer of fuel to a vehicle. Here's another example of how a different facility came into compliance. This facility had their ASTs specially fabricated to include a canopy over the fueling station. So after you've observed any compliance issues during a site inspection, you'll want to note those issues in the site inspection report and outline actions to be taken for the registrant to come into compliance. For example, if they need to seal a floor drain or place hazardous materials in secondary containment. The registrant will need to come up with a schedule to take the necessary actions and a time frame that they will be in compliance with the regulations. A conditional approval of the registration can be granted based on the schedule. The conditions of the approval must be outlined in the registration approval letter. The language in the approval letter can be something along the lines of, this registration is issued upon the conditions and schedule regarding the following, and then outline the actions to be taken in the time frame that the facility has given you for the expected completion date. An easy way to keep track of different compliance schedules is adding those schedules to your registration tracking sheet. And then you can follow up with the registrant when the deadline approaches if you haven't gotten an update from them already. So in conclusion, site inspections are necessary for the successful implementation of the Aquifer Protection Area Program. They enable you to identify existing and potential conditions that could impact the quality of groundwater. They allow you to determine if facilities are in compliance with Aquifer Protection Area and other environmental regulations, and suggest best management practices or procedural changes in order to mitigate potential risks to the aquifer. They also give you the opportunity to build a relationship with your regulated community and educate them on water quality issues and other environmental regulations. And with that, we can open it up with some questions.
Thank you, Melissa F. and Melissa M. for your presentation. I will stop the recording.